Most people think confidence is something you build from achievement, success, recognition, approval, looking the part, acting confident, being liked. But in my experience as a therapist and identity coach, confidence is not really an external achievement at all. Confidence is actually an inner feeling experience that emerges from knowing who you are. And if we don't know who we are, confidence becomes fragile, conditional, dependent on circumstances. One criticism can shatter it, one rejection can collapse it, one difficult relationship can make us question ourselves all over again. This is why identity matters, because identity forms the foundation of self-worth. Many people come to therapy saying things like, I've lost myself, I don't know who I am anymore, I feel disconnected, I don't feel enough. And often what they're describing is not simply low confidence, they're describing a fractured relationship with themselves, a loss of identity. The problem is many of us were never really allowed to develop a healthy sense of self in the first place. If you grew up in an environment where your feelings were dismissed, where love felt conditional, where you had to adapt to keep the peace, where you became the good child, the achiever, the people pleaser, the caretaker, or the invisible one, then your identity may have formed around survival rather than authenticity. In other words, you learned who you needed to be in order to feel safe. And over time, that adapted version of self can become so automatic that you lose connection with who you actually are underneath it all. This is why so many adults feel anxious when they begin setting boundaries, because boundaries reveal identity. Every time you say no, every time you express a need, every time you disappoint somebody, every time you stop over-explaining yourself, you are unconsciously declaring, this is who I am, this is what matters to me, this is what I will and won't accept. And if your identity is always dependent on keeping other people happy, boundaries can feel terrifying, because somewhere deep inside, the inner child fears rejection, abandonment, criticism, or conflict. But healthy boundaries are not walls. They are expressions of selfhood. A boundary says, I exist too, and this is important. Boundaries without consequences are not boundaries. They are simply requests. If somebody repeatedly crosses your limits and nothing changes, your nervous system unconsciously learns that your needs do not matter, that your identity is negotiable, that your self-respect can be overridden in order to maintain connection. This is why appropriate consequences matter. Not punishment, not revenge, but consequence. If somebody continually disrespects you, the consequence may be emotional distance, reduced access, a different level of trust, or in some cases, ending the relationship entirely. Because every healthy identity needs structure around it. And this is where many people become confused. They think boundaries are about controlling other people. They're not. Boundaries are about clarifying ourselves. The stronger your sense of identity becomes, the less energy you spend trying to manage how everybody else feels about you. Now, here's another important part of this conversation. We do not discover who we are in isolation. We discover who we are in relationship. Human beings are relational creatures. We learn about ourselves through connection, reflection, attachment, conflict, intimacy, repair, and emotional experience with others. A child only comes to know themselves because somebody mirrors them. I see you matter. Your feelings make sense. You are safe with me. This is how identity develops. But if those experiences were inconsistent, critical, rejecting, emotionally absent, or conditional, we may grow up with a distorted identity. We begin seeing ourselves through the eyes of criticism instead of compassion. And many adults continue repeating this pattern unconsciously. They enter relationships that reinforce old beliefs. They abandon their needs to maintain connection. They fear conflict. They overthink. They people please. They become whoever others need them to be. But underneath all of that is often a frightened inner child asking one question. If I truly become myself, will I still be loved? That is why identity work is so important, because healing is not becoming somebody new. Healing is returning to who you were before you learned to abandon yourself and sense of self. Real confidence does not come from pretending not to care. Real confidence comes from self-acceptance, from congruence, from alignment between your values, your feelings, your behaviors, and your relationships. And when identity strengthens, something powerful begins to happen. You stop chasing approval quite so desperately. You stop explaining yourself to everybody. You trust your instincts more. You tolerate disagreement without collapsing. You become less reactive to criticism. You stop shape-shifting in every room you enter, because your sense of self no longer entirely depends on external validation. You know who you are. And perhaps most importantly, you begin creating relationships that reflect your identity rather than relationships that erase it. That is the deeper purpose of boundaries, not separation, not control, but self-respect. Identity is not simply a label, it is an internal relationship with yourself. And the healthier that relationship becomes, the more confidence, self-worth, emotional safety, and belonging you begin to feel inside. Not because the world changed, but because your relationship with yourself changed. If you'd like help developing a greater sense of self, visit my website, book a free discovery call. Let's see what's possible.